this time in history will be written about. I would say in textbooks, but there won't be textbooks. Our kids will be chat GPTing about this stuff, and their grandkids, because this is one of the most chaotic moments in history. The global trade.
I agree, Dan. And chaos loves analysts.
Founder and CEO of More Insights and Strategy, Patrick Moorhead.
6, 5.
CEO of the Futurum Group,
Daniel Newman.
6, 5.
You know a lot about what's going on, Moorhead?
I think we do. All right, the 6-5 Weekly Podcast is back. New format, same brains, same personalities. Is that a good thing, Dan? I don't know.
I don't know if that's a good thing. And my brain's growing. This hat keeps getting smaller.
No, it is. I mean, your brain has to keep up with your arms, which we might have to have a different type of camera once they start.
Is this the part where you want to talk about your personal best this morning? Is that why we went right into the muscle and meatheadedness?
I mean, possibly. I mean, listen, I'm pretty excited. You know, when you get to my age, you got to have something to be excited about. And yeah, I set a new personal best on deadlift. And even though it wasn't a big leg press day, I did crank out as many as my personal best after doing deadlifts. So pretty happy about that. I think I've doubled weights on deadlifts. And for all of you who deadlift, there's a lot of brain interconnectivity that gets in there. It's not all just strength, but I did see our trainer post just a monster deadlift that you did out there. I mean, literally those 45s were covering almost the entire bar.
Did you post that? I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's on Instagram.
Oh, nice. Am I like a fitness model now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been a goal of mine for a long time. I have a lot of people on X that tend to think that my opinions about the market aren't very good. So maybe if I just take shirtless pics and deadlifts and stuff, I could go back to just being a meathead, you know?
I don't know. If I look at, the hate that gets delivered on Kramer and all the different markets, personalities, I think you're in a very good crew to be attacked. But hey, we have been on the road, I think, for 4 straight weeks. And we are back in Austin. I am not in a hotel. I am in my living room. My wife.
I like your living room so much better than your office. I'm not going to lie.
No, I mean, I do too. And I wish I could do it every time. But the problem is that other people live here.
They don't have to. I mean, you can change that.
Yeah, I could get a bigger office, but I really don't want to be spending more cash on that.
Are you going to start talking about feeling poor now? Is this going to happen on the air?
I might. Yeah, I operate in cash. I'm kind of like
super uncomfortable.
Kind of like the day trader. Kind of like the day trader of running businesses. But
my dad was a entrepreneur, and he always he called something the privilege of poverty is what he called it. So he would like drive a crappy car to work. Like he'd have nice things, but he would wear it was in trucking, so it was a pretty industrial business. But he had a beat up pickup truck he would drive to work. Carhartt, he'd wear he owned the company, but and then he'd have his Corvette at home or whatever. Never showed it to anybody. I mean, you wear $3,000 sweaters, so I don't know if you can ever claim to be poor. But I do love those sweaters, by the way. I'm waiting for you to get so big you grow out of them, and then you're like, Dan, you want this awesome black Prada sweater that I wear? I mean, that is my favorite one. So if you ever are gonna downsize your stuff, now that I'm all skinny.
No, I hear you, Dan. So I promise I'm not going to talk about your $100,000 watches, both of them.
You know what? I wore one of those, and I had it in a picture. And of course, there's always those people that catch those details on X, and then they just razz you to death. So again, privilege of poverty. You should just wear your Apple Watch, and just be humble, man. Don't, nobody needs to know that you're the man.
All right. We actually do have a show. We actually do talk tech here, believe it or not. And we've got this new format. We've got Decode, where essentially we go through some of the top news items, the news events, and we decode it for you. And then we go into the flip. You're going to love the flip, folks. The flip is where again, caveat here, we don't necessarily agree with what we're debating. We're just debating. It's kind of like CNN Crossfire. And what we're debating this week is Trump winning the tariff war? Yes or no? This is going to be a good one. I think I prepared for 5 minutes for this one. So I'm going to be good and ready. And then we have Market Magnus, and this is bulls and bears. I mean, one day it's down 10%, the next day it's up 7. I mean, it is absolute market madness. So
whipsaw, baby, whipsaw.
No, totally. So hey, let's jump in to the decode. All right, here we go. So Dan, you and I just got back from Google Cloud Next. A lot of products, were announced. A lot of services were announced. We sat in a lot of keynotes. Actually, we didn't make it to the keynote. A long, weird story behind that one. But we did have some one-on-ones with folks, met with some key executives. What were your biggest takeaways, Dan?
Maybe we just kind of hit these few at a time, one at a time. I'll start with the thing that I really like to talk about, which is infrastructure, and specifically Ironwood. One of my big takeaways, and you said this well, I don't want to take a claim to something you said, but we all know Google has been doing the TPU for nearly a decade and has been building its own chips. It was doing it before any of the other cloud companies. But it's seemingly getting really, really serious about infrastructure. Something you said was, you talked about how Google got really serious about infrastructure. And I have to say, like, their whole little layer stack cake of what they're doing, and how, whether it was Thomas Kurian or it was Mark Lohmeyer that we interviewed on the 6.5, talked about, the company, they were really talking from an infrastructure up level. And that's a little bit different. It's a little bit of a pivot, Pat. I mean, I know you called it out, but I mean, they're up to V7 now. We think it's probably a Broadcom partnership. They're not saying that. It's a very compelling TPU, but it's not just the TPU, by the way. It's networking offload. It's storage innovation. It's, a new CPU, new enhancements to the DPU. I mean, I was hot on what they're doing at that kind of hypercomputer up level.
Yeah, IaaS is a first-party citizen. About 2 years ago, we brought this into the pod and our research, and that was that Azure got serious about talking about it. It's not that they didn't do it and didn't do it at scale. It's just it wasn't their first sort order. It was more like PaaS and SaaS. And the interesting part is, I mean, Thomas Kurian started off, and I often view how a leader, the order at which they talk about things. The first thing he talked about to us was connectivity, right? With Cloud WAN and Cloud Interconnect. I thought wow, that's wild. And the second one was infrastructure, right? Very interesting positioning that they had in AI. They want to be the best intelligence at the lowest cost. And it was like, lowest cost Google. I don't think I've ever heard them ever say that. And I think best intelligence isn't just architecture. It's essentially using their models on TPU. Okay. And notice that on TPU.
Yeah, you got to double down there, Pat. They're training all of their models, right? I mean,
right. They're the only company who's training all of their first party models. Trainium is training a lot of models. I think a lot of the alternatives to OpenAI, but it blew everybody away when they announced that.
Yeah, I remember. I think TPU also trained at least some of the Anthropic, which was, if I remember reading that, which is interesting because obviously Amazon's the big investor. But this week, I mean, kind of as an aside, we did see an escalation. I mean, Andy Jassy went on CNBC and talked quite a bit about this kind of AI advancing and how expensive silicon. I mean, that was his comment, expensive silicon. And this really kind of matches what you and I've talked about. I mean, I think we had a flip here about this topic about NVIDIA and the XPU and what's going to win and how is that going to pan out. And, we've talked a lot about that, Pat, but it's like first party infrastructure, to your point, is not a second-class citizen anymore. It's a first-class citizen. If we're going to do scale AI, we're going to have to bring down costs. And by the way, it's not just the AI chip; it's the CPUs as well. I mean, you saw C4A, the ARM instances. I mean, they're Google is going after it in the $5.8 to $50 billion run they've made since Thomas Kurian took the helm. I mean, this is not a also ran.
Yeah, I don't know what tests they use. This is the first time that I heard Google explicitly go after AWS related to infrastructure. And they even put up a slide showing how their ARM chip, Axion, was better price performance than Graviton. No idea what the tests were, how they were made up. No, we did not test that, nor did Signal 65. But for them even to say, they were even making comments about Trainium as well. So it's on. And I think that what Google is recognizing is that IaaS is an on-ramp to PaaS and SaaS. And I also think that they're looking at this as maybe a hedge with all that CapEx that they're spending. They need to soak it up. They need to soak it up somehow. And interesting thing on TPU 2 that caught me was support for VLLM, right? Which is essentially an abstraction layer, industry standard abstraction layer versus lower level CUDA. So you can get TPU as a managed service on Vertex AI. You can do basically lower level IaaS and build it yourself with support for JAX, PyTorch, things like VLLM. So it's
You've heard of build it yourself, right? Or you can go down the path of sort of serverless and basically use the software out of the box with the hardware sort of just running in the background. I mean, they threw out some pretty interesting numbers. I had an intelligence per dollar slide. I think you shared it. We'll put it in the show notes. But, they said something like their AI hypercomputer is able to deliver 24 times more intelligence per dollar. Now, I'd like to get underneath what intelligence per dollar means, because sometimes these claims are, this is why we stood up Signal 65, because these claims always need to be validated. But even 5 times more intelligence per dollar than you could get out of DeepSeek, basically running Gemini 2.0 Flash on their hypercomputer. So
yeah, a lot of this had to do with the latest. It was Gemini 2.0 Flash, right? And they're using an industry standard intelligence benchmark on that, and sitting on top of TPUs. No, this is not sitting on NVIDIA, although I would say in parentheses, they did say, yeah, we're the first one, the GB200, and we're going to be one of the first with Vera Rubin. So, all three companies are kind of playing this, I love NVIDIA, but I'm going to create my own to have better price per outcome.
But do they really? That's the real debate that at some point will have to be had with the world. You and I are both, I think, very impressed and continue to see NVIDIA as the class of this industry right now. But I also think there's some really weird friction going on there that I won't relent that I believe there's some weird friction. But actually, Google has been the most disciplined about realizing the value of the partnership and not sort of coming out with any sort of aggressive positioning, competitive positioning. So there's 2 other things I think are worth noting about the event. There's a lot of things, but I think just, and I'll let you kind of pick. I'll pick 2 and maybe you lead into which one, if either of them interest you. But I think, of course, agents. It was a lot of agents. And the other one was Google Distributed Cloud and the air-gapped Gemini, which tells a big story about sort of how the company wants to enable enterprise generative tools to proliferate.
Yeah, a lot of companies talk about being multi-cloud. Actually, I don't think AWS uses that word to this day, but when you were the number 3 player in distant, like Google was 6 years ago, they leaned into it, right? You had Anthos, which was infrastructure that you would put on-prem. But man, when I look at the combination of Cloud WAN and Cloud Interconnect, plus running Gemini on-prem on like Dell infrastructure, and they run it as a managed service. Man, this is what I've been talking about for like 10 years. The hybrid multi-cloud, like we're in this standoff. You've got all this public cloud growth, which everybody's, talking points that once you drill down, and even even the conversation we had with Satya, right? He said, people are going to have to go to the cloud. And, with 80% of the data on-prem, and not moving in a big way for a lot of different reasons, whether it be control, perceived security, and cost, it's not moving. So how do you activate that data that's sitting in on-prem? And oh, by the way, in a disconnected, air-gapped manner, Azure did bring out an air-gapped solution, but it is in an Azure disconnected cloud. I know that sounds weird, but that's the case. So with Google, you can actually run it on Dell hardware, and I found that was interesting. I mean, listen, there was a ton talked about agents. Agents were interesting. I don't see a strategic change in what they brought out with agents. What they did do is they built out their capabilities not only internally but with third-party APIs. We need to get under this agent-to-agent communications. Our principal analysts for that will be getting under these. So let's any other thoughts, Dan?
No, I was just going to say, I think Google has done an interesting job positioning sort of this orchestration layer for agents. I think these APIs and connectors are really important. We've done a ton of evaluation on this: Salesforce, Workday, Oracle, and all these applications have their own agents. Bottom line, though, is no company runs their entire business in a single application. So is it going to get managed in the platform, Pat, or is it going to get managed by people basically having a ton of different agents and different tools? It seems like having it platform managed is a vehicle to getting where you want to go. And so Google has an opportunity there, and I expect all the other cloud players to follow, not trying to make this too proprietary.
Yeah, I'll end with I'm still not convinced that I see black and white differences between anybody's horizontal agents across Google, AWS, or Microsoft at this point. But it's game on, man. You've got vertical agents, you have horizontal agents, all pretty much going after each other. And we saw it ignite all the third-party agents in the data that can be combined with Microsoft Copilot. So, hey, let's jump into the next topic, which is the IBM Z17 mainframe announcement. You and I were both in New York, I think, 2 weeks ago to get the pre-briefing. It was a great event. We got to see chips, we got to see infrastructure, we got to see a lot of software. And I think my biggest takeaway here really was about the capabilities of what this enables. We've been talking a ton about AI the last couple years, and typically it's been in the context of platforms that were x86 platforms, ARM platforms, and NVIDIA platforms. But now with the Z17, IBM gets in the game. And if you look at the type of customers that they attract, right, the financial institutions doing transaction processing, governments, airlines, a very highly regulated industry where uptime, where security is important. And in those environments, those customers were doing AI, but they were ETLing the data out to a server, applying AI on it, training and inference, and then rolling it back into the mainframe, which, by the way, was very slow and it's very costly. And as we know, every time that you move data, you're increasing the likelihood of a security incident. And when it comes to transactions, there are actually legal guidelines around how quickly you have to make those happen. And still to this day, even though all the cloud guys and all the x86 guys have tried to kill the mainframe, it cannot be reproduced at this point. And then when you layer on top that IBM Z17 is really I would say a first-party citizen when it comes to the hybrid multi-cloud, in that you can run Linux, you can run containers, you can run agentic frameworks on top of it. The value proposition just keeps getting better.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. There was a pretty big set of infrastructure announcements again. Like, this stuff is all about us. They literally did these announcements because they were thinking about us. Like, we want to put out a next generation inference chip, and then we're going to also build a new, network, offload with Spyre, and then of course we're going to build the accelerators with their new Telum 2 chip. But Pat, look, people don't like when we kind of make the negative commentary about mainframe not being dead and blah 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 blah. So we won't do that. But let's just basically say this is like, the mainframe connecting to the cloud is a real thing, and it's being done in a way that's secure is a real thing. The mainframe being able to handle acceleration and implement AI at the software layer. And by the way, there's all kinds of integrations they're building with Red Hat and others that enable more advancement in software and development, and of course bringing over things like how you can port software, and building tools that enable kind of next generation coders with generative AI to build for the historic platforms programming. I don't think you do COBOL, do you?
Not yet.
No, I mean that was what I was going to go back to school for, but
No,
I
you can
decided
with Amazon Q. I can do.
instead decided to just go to the gym and be a meathead. But in all seriousness, like, this is critical, and Pat, this is also massive industry enabler for those. You talked about the highly regulated, but listen, the banks all depend on this technology. This will be a great upgrade cycle for IBM. It always is. It's a huge margin driver for the company. And people are not leaving the platform. And actually, if anything, kind of the macro and the uncertainty and the challenges, that slows down migrations. And it actually makes platforms like this even stickier. The world's transactions depend on IBM Z. So this was a great announcement. Congratulations to our friend Ross Morey, who leads that business. It's very encouraging, but I'm actually most encouraged that they're definitely not sitting on their laurels. They're continuing to push innovation and make this an exciting technology and product. And, its sister product, the Linux One product, has also been pretty exciting, as IBM has really been the champion of Linux, in open source. It's been a big part of their vision. And I think that actually spans to some of these bigger on-premise opportunities. They're not mainframe opportunities, but where you need that kind of heavy horsepower for compute.
Yeah, just some final comments on it. What I like is the increasing levels of integration with the entire platform, right? And we've seen this historically, where something starts off at a card and then it gets integrated into the chip itself. And right, the DPU went from a card into the chip itself. And Telum 2 has a beefier AI module. And then if you want more, you can get a Spyre card. And one of the things that I thought was super important here is that you don't want to have to change your programming model depending on what hardware you're going to use. So software model based on the hardware that you use. And typically what will happen is, over time, those tasks that were, let's say, easier can move on chip, and you get lower latency and you get lower cost. So the software environment that IBM has created across AI can more gracefully take you from the Spyre card, let's say in 2026, to, I'll call it Telum 3 at 2028 or something like that. You don't have to radically shift the software, and I think that's super important. And right now, that's a challenge that NVIDIA has, right? NVIDIA does not have that end-to-end capability. Interestingly enough, AMD does, and so does Intel. Actually, and ironically, Intel has the biggest spread, which is, you can take Gaudi 3 as an accelerator to a Xeon with on-chip acceleration like AMX, and once that gets super easy, you can offload that off of AMX in 3 or 4 years. So, anyways, I like the software story. It's not like something that's dead end. Okay, final Decode topic here is Apple and tariffs. I think you and I both generally agree that Apple is in the worst shape as it comes to these tariffs, Dan, yet their stock hasn't tanked, right?
It's kind of tanked. I mean, what's it trading at right now? Let's look at that just out of curiosity. I know, like, we're not making stock recommendations.
Yeah,
but
just to be clear, tanked versus what it might, given the amount of business they do that most of their iPhones are going to get. What are we at? 125% tariffs at this point?
145. Yeah.
145%. Yeah, it's hard to keep track, and you would expect that their market cap would be halved, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, they're down from a high not too long ago of what, 260 or something like that. Now they went all the way down to about 175 on the biggest fall day, and they're sitting at about 191 right now, which, again, we're not looking at technicals and making stock calls, but we are looking at markets and technologies. And I think we should call this segment, how effed is Apple? How screwed is Apple right now? I mean, I was on Fox Business the other day, and I kind of went down this path about this. Basically, the Mag 7's broken. Like, it's not, the 7 do not move in any, like, there's always been a little bit of disconnect, but there's always been also a lot of correlation to the Mag 7. And right now it's super broken because there's like two companies that are really heavily enterprise centric that I just don't see how this whole situation is going to make a big difference. I mean, and then there's like 3 that are like very advertising dependent. So that can be very impacted by things like recession and small business. And then there's 2 that I just think are completely screwed because they're consumer product. And, it's the car, the Tesla, and Tesla's already super overvalued, even though it's a cool company. But Apple is like, Pat, could everything not go wrong at one time for a company? I mean, listen, first of all, we've basically now waged, first of all, like, they committed $500 billion of spend. I mean, maybe if they actually started doing some of that instead of just talking about it, they would make President Trump a little happier. But in all seriousness, like, we've got a massive, trade war. We'll talk more about that in our next segment. But like, China and the US, it's pretty much down to that. And so Apple's super dependent on that market for manufacturing. It's also a huge market for buying. So you have both sides of their kind of economics, under duress right now. You've put 145% tariff on the import, which means there's just absolutely no way the prices aren't going to be impacted by that. And moving manufacturing isn't easy. Now, you could optimistically say Tesla built a gigafactory in China in 11 months. So Apple could accelerate. I'm not saying they could do 11 months, but they could probably try to move fast and build in advance. They could try to move more to India. They could try to move something here. They could look at something under MCA in Mexico. But the bottom line,
how about at a minimum, Dan, how about just making desktops here, right? They used to make desktops here in Austin, Texas, and then they moved that back to China, right? And you're right. I mean, it's the double whammy, right? The lens that I look at this is, okay, number one, increased COGS and increased CapEx amortization through tariffs. Check. Potential decrease in consumption from higher prices driven by the higher COGS. Check. Here we are. And with 90% of Apple's manufacturing done in China, with 5 years it would probably take to even meaningfully move volume to India, that, by the way, has 10% tariffs, used to have 34% tariffs. And then you've got 20% of revenue from Chinese consumers that who knows, maybe China, even though this stuff is built in China, they penalize an American icon company.
I mean, do they hate America more than they love Apple right now?
Probably. I think it's a good way to look at it. I mean, heck, even the Europeans are looking at tariffing services of American companies, right? Which isn't even cross border, not goods other than electrons. So
talk about how much they would screw their own people, though. I mean, like I guess if everybody's going to run their business on SAP apps, I'm serious. Like those
no,
companies
no,
are going
no.
to have to. That,
Yeah, we'll get into that when we talk about the flip.
well,
But
yeah, but
so
European
really,
policy is stupid anyway. Right now,
yeah,
I mean, they want.
so really, it really at this point, right? It's like up to an administrative reprieve, and um, the U.S. administrations, right across Obama, Trump 1.0, have come in and saved Apple from a lot of these things. And then the question is, if they get some sort of reprieve, like why not all notebook PC makers, like HP and Dell, that do all of their notebooks in China? Will they play? Will they play favorites? Right. So services, I said in my tweet, services aren't saving Apple this time, only the
They're going to
administration.
start banning the movies. They're going to ban movies in China. That was another thing they talked about is like U.S. media is going to get further blocked, Pat. But I mean, the desktop, like making any progress in terms of U.S. manufacturing would be great. But like, I just don't think they can move that quick. I don't know that they can move that quick. And like you said, I don't understand though between us, like why would it take 5 years to expand in India? I know India's got a lot of weird bureaucracy as well and red tape, but like when you hear about Musk building the like mega factories to build cars and doing it in 11 months, I know phones aren't cars, but cars are a pretty sophisticated manufacturing process. Like
Foxconn has 1 million people working on iPhones in China, and they actually have to import people from Malaysia. They literally put them on a boat and have them live in the work camps over there to make that happen. So even China doesn't have enough people to pull this off. And then the entire ecosystem that surrounds a factory with all the parts that go into that has to be created. It's very similar, although less technical, to putting a foundry in a country. Okay, and India operates more as a loose affiliation across states compared to China. Like if China wants to take out an entire city and put a highway through, they just do it, and then they relocate people. They don't get a vote, and they don't get a chance. So very strong command and control in China, where it's a more distributed architecture and a distributed governing body in India. And let's not forget water, electricity. While it has been greatly improved, China got a head start on this almost 20 years ago. So that is why it takes this long to get, I'll call it meaningful volume to India. Because right now, what 5%? Somebody
I think
told
it's
me
less
that
than 10, but I mean they do have a big
they put screws in or something.
yeah, but they do
over
have
there.
earpods and some other meaningful products that are largely manufactured now in India. Basically, the bottom line is on a 1 to 10, they're like screwed 9.
Yes.
They're screwed.
Well, if you believe that these will stick, their market cap would be cut in half at least. I mean, I just don't see. I don't see an option, and
Either
there's
their margins have to eat crow, right?
yeah,
Or
yeah.
people will have to show they're willing to spend more. And if we go into some type of recession, you're not going to pay $2,700 for an iPhone. I mean, maybe you will. I don't know. I might.
All right. Hey, just to make a long story longer, let's dive into the flip here. And again, the flip is where we argue not necessarily what we think, but we take two sides of an argument. So here is what we are debating. Trump is winning the tariff war. So let's do that flip of the coin here. All right,
Did I
Dan.
win? Did I win the flip?
You did. So you need to argue that Trump is winning the tariff war.
All right. Trump is the ultimate negotiator. This is 4D chess that he is playing, textbook art of the deal. It's always about starting with a monster ask. It's never about, precision. This isn't acute. He's not doing a small surgery and improving and clearing the arteries. He's clearing the world from what has been bad policy for multiple decades that has set the United States behind. We just talked about how we can't manufacture iPhones. And it's not about bringing people back to screw in iPhones. It's about building the next generation of the most advanced factories based on robotics that are going to be able to make the things that we need here in the United States. So he was not ever planning to get all these tariffs in place. It was a big chess move, 4D chess move to get there. So the big ask now has come down to be a smaller ask, because after some consideration and watching some of the variables at stake, he finally came out and said what he was really after. And he's after two things, and he's already winning. The first is getting China on the defense. And China can posture. All these countries can make posture, but they depend on our consumers. China will get hurt worse than we will. They have population issues. They've built trillions of dollars of factories to be able to flood the world with goods. And there's nowhere in the world you can flood with goods the way you can flood the United States. We have the consumers. We have the spending capability here. The cards are in his favor, as he would like to say. He's also all about making the Fed move. And what we've done through all this tariff war is we've basically created a ton of uncertainty around the world because our economies and our financial systems are all interconnected. We've got the massive carry trade in Japan that's causing interest rates to move all over the map. We're seeing inflation tumble to lows, and yet the Fed is playing politics and not lowering its rate. Let's be very clear. Trump is putting Fed Chair Jerome Powell into the corner, and he is in the corner no matter what he says. First, and then next off, the United States has an incredibly monster debt problem right now. More bad policy has put us in a position where we are now $37 trillion in debt, and we are running a $2 trillion annual deficit. This is unsustainable. It's a much bigger problem than we want to admit. We've got almost $10 trillion coming due to refinance this year. And yes, the 10-year might be moving around, but ultimately interest rates, when he wins with Powell, will come down. They'll be able to refinance that debt, and they will save tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars when we get those interest rates down. We're already seeing the work of Doge make a difference. The deficit in the last month went to a multi-year low. The spending cuts are starting to make a difference. And remember, he's got the support of Bessent, who's a very smart, very calculated, thoughtful leader of the Treasury. And he did the big short on the pound. He's doing a similar game here. He understands how the world works. He understands that what we need to do is bring the world to the table, make them our partner. And then what ends up happening is that China gets left in a corner, the Fed gets put in a corner, and that's the 4D chess game that he is playing. The last thing I will say is, look, we can have a long debate about cheap goods, but cheap goods is not what we are really arguing about here. This is about a broken relationship where we've outsourced all of our critical industry, our critical infrastructure development, and our IP. We have to bring IP back. We are getting squeezed by the world because we can't make our own semiconductors. If we can't make our own semiconductors here, we cannot lead the world in technology. If we cannot lead the world in technology, we cannot end up ultimately leading in AI because China can always go after Taiwan. And we are so dependent on Taiwan that all this interconnectedness basically means we don't have the IP we need. So we've outsourced our critical manufacturing. We've outsourced much of our energy needs. We've outsourced critical resources. And significant parts of our defense are now dependent on this as well. We have no choice but to bring it back. It's not about people screwing in iPhones. It's about building the next generation of innovative factories and making sure that we control our destiny. Trump is winning. Powell's in the corner. China, the move is yours.
Yeah. So, Dan, I think you did a great job talking in theory of why these tariffs might be a good thing for the United States and the rest of the world. But what we're arguing here is that Trump is winning the trade war. So, you talked about Art of the Deal. That book was written when I was still in college, before I think 4D chess was even
Can't believe it was 50 years ago.
it's been a long time. And since then, what has Trump done? Like, is he a magnet, like a financial guru? I mean, he sells cheap wine. He has hotels no one wants to stay in, and a guy that won't even show his taxes to reflect how much money his companies have lost. So, I mean, that is the art of the deal here. And you've got, people who built real businesses like Elon Musk, who think these tariffs are completely ridiculous, and a lot of people that we respect that think this is ridiculous. And if and this is going to be the easiest one yet for me to win, and I win most of these. I mean, you're very articulate. You speak in complete sentences. I have some ums and some pauses, Dan, but that's just my thoughtful nature. So he hasn't won anything yet, right? There's not a single deal that has been done. But I could stop here, but I'll go on. So let's look at the policy U-turns, okay? Let me quote unquote, this is not a negotiating tactic, to we're open negotiations, quote unquote, to we're going to make iPhones in the US. Can you be more disconnected? I think we just argued the fact that there is no way that iPhones will ever be made in the US. So talk about ivory tower disconnection from the common man or common person that got Trump into the White House, right? Next major point, he's alienating our allies that we have had for, in some cases, centuries, as related to like France. Europe is looking at adding tariffs on U.S. services like Azure and Google Cloud, which, again, we can debate whether that's fair, but that's the reflexive situation going on. Europe is already lowering barriers to Chinese EVs. You and I talked about that yesterday. Europe and U.S. have to connect to create this blockade versus China, not to disincent them from doing this. I mean, Mexico and Canada, this is completely ridiculous. Who are the two countries? We've got Canada that stands between the US and Russia. Mexico should be our low-cost manufacturing hub to compete with China. And oh, by the way, a geographic barrier to what China is doing throughout South America. Let's go to markets. All right, markets are imploding, right? Gosh, it had the huge run up once there was the 90-day. But what's happening is the calculus of what China impact is going to be is finally settling. And what about the bond market? Oh my gosh, interest rates for the 2, the 10, the 30 are all up. Okay, and what does that 30-year mean to people? It essentially means that you will be paying a higher interest rate than you were before. Did Trump run on lower interest rates and lower inflation? But hey, let's talk prices, right? So I think yesterday, right, inflation was pegged at 2.4% before the tariffs. And in the end, tariffs are really just a tax on consumers and businesses. So, economists have predicted the import taxes could add up to 3 percentage points to U.S. inflation next year. The NRF, National Retail Foundation, has a disproportionate impact on local communities and small retailers who operate on thin margins. Medicine, where do you think the core ingredients from all antibiotics come from? They come from China. How about farmers, right? Key American products like soybeans, right, are looking at 100+% tariffs in China, triple the peak rate in 2018. And what's happening, right? Brazilian soybean makers are edging in, and China is starting to buy from them. Oh, don't like Boeing? We'll buy Airbus. So the switching costs here could be immense. And my final point here, and again, this is the easiest one I've had to debate yet. As prices go up, people buy less, and we're in a recession. And whether you want to make fun of the IMF, right? They're warning that the escalation can cause essentially a collapse of the post-World War II free trade order and fracture supply chains, weakening an already ailing world economy. So, Dan.
Hey, congratulations on reading the teleprompter from MSNBC, Pat. You did well.
No, I appreciate that. No, I did at least 5 minutes of research on this. So, but no, that was a good one, man. So again, caveat: we don't necessarily argue what we believe. My biggest fear, Dan, flip aside, is that if we go to war with China, there are things that we just can't do. Our side won World War II for manufacturing prowess, and so did pretty much World War One. And with our inability to create basic things, all the medicine that's done in China, it's like, I think we need to put ourselves in a position to be able to do those things. And I do believe we have been taken advantage of, and we took our eye off the ball.
That was your best argument for me so far. I want to thank everybody out there that Pat's close was also basically a vote for the fact that
I said it wasn't the flip. If you weren't
we're done, but
you weren't doing your email.
A real debater doesn't stop debating just because some sort of clock. I mean, we got to go after it. This is like a marriage, man. This war is not over yet. You want to make sure that we keep ourselves vulnerable. Let's make sure that we can't make any of the stuff we need. And we've pretty much done that. So good on us. Mission accomplished. Where's George W. when we need him?
Exactly. Yeah, good old NAFTA man. Okay, let's dive into the last part of our segment. Market madness, bulls and bears, market chaos. All right, Daniel. So just to make a long story longer, we're going to talk tariffs. Kind of where are we? I mean, this thing goes day to day, right? We've got a 90-day pause on tariffs, except for China. By the way, the pause was retaliatory. We're still 10%ing everybody. Okay, let's just get this. Let's just get this out there.
We just need to make deals with everybody. We leave the 10%. That's reasonable. And it becomes a long-term strategy. One of the things neither of us really said is China's playing the long game. I mean, Xi Jinping could be president until he dies. He can do this for the rest of his life, and he can then name a successor that's basically going to believe what he believes. And, that's why I said, like, the $2 trillion they've spent building factories to make sure they can put their goods on the world. I mean, look, even Trump is saying it. Like, Trump really is kind of saying we've been taken advantage of, and it's not Xi Jinping's fault. He actually admits, like, because any good business or world leader will take advantage of a situation in which, look, the most interesting thing to me about this is kind of how what's typically kind of the more social good party, being the liberal and left and Democrat party, is sort of celebrating the idea of outsourcing, because that is what has happened. I mean, we can debate how it's being done. Like, I think you and I, if we actually did the flip in a moderate manner, we would agree that some of the policy ideas are good. The mechanisms are probably not that good, and we'd love to see it done in a more precision manner with places that it needs to be done. But look, I mean, we've literally let them spend $2 trillion. They can now dump cheap goods on the world. We can't make iPhones. We can't make semiconductors. We can't make servers. We can't make cars. I mean, we can't make them inexpensively. Not in the U.S. We
have shown that we can do cars, and Tesla is a great example. And I think if it weren't for NAFTA and USMCA, we probably would have done more of that. But I
retract. But the point is, largely, we haven't been able to.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I said in the earlier segment, I like to segment, right, which is most at risk, potentially at risk, and least at risk, given this right now. And we are talking market madness here. So most at risk are importers of products from China and anything that could be influenced by recessionary impacts, which is consumer plays. So consumer products, advertising, those are going to get hit first. And the potentially and least at risk, right, in tech are going to be software and SaaS companies, even though the EU is threatening to tax services out there. And right now, the semiconductor plays that aren't pulling products from China, at least right now, our semiconductors are not being tariffed. And then you've got the companies who are doing the servers and the desktops who are doing most of their manufacturing out of Mexico at this point. You know, companies like NVIDIA, and not enough people are talking about this, they do full racks and they come directly from Taiwan. I mean, Foxconn is looking at, that they've committed to investing $900 million to build another infrastructure factory, but not yet. You know, and nobody is talking about doing notebooks in Mexico at this point. So if you're looking for those companies, again, do not take anything we say as investment advice. Come up with a segmentation of how you do it, most at risk, potentially at risk, least at risk, and go all in on the least risk and maybe short the most at risk.
Yeah, I'm a long guy, don't short. But what I'll say is, I know we're coming up on some time here. You and I got to get to work. I got a bunch of corporate meetings or whatever I do all day. But I really do double down on the fact that, there is some uncertainty about what might happen with software and services, and there is some uncertainty about how the actual supply chain for like AI systems and servers works, and how the MCA might work, and how NVIDIA can get around their chips. And I've talked to a number of CEOs involved, some in Stargate, some in big semiconductor companies, and I have it on good accord that there's almost no fear that the AI build out will continue no matter what happens with tariffs. It is the most bulletproof investment. Again, I believe this to be true because the biggest companies have enough operating leverage, enough cash on the balance sheet that what they're going to do now is invest and actually separate themselves farther from smaller companies that are trying to compete, that can't get cash, that can't get support, that end up in a tougher situation. And they're going to build out their infrastructure and be ready, because this will turn. Look, we might go into a recession. We might go into a deep recession, but the big companies, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the NVIDIAs, the Googles, they have the money, they have the balance sheets, they can trim down their costs, and they can accelerate, and they'll still grow. They may not grow as much, but they tend to still grow even when the economy is bad. I like those companies, but I like the ones the most, like the Microsoft NVIDIAs, that have almost exclusively enterprise exposure, don't have ads, don't have consumer products of much scale. They're really focused on serving enterprise. I also like some software companies. I like the ones that are enterprise software, because you lower your OpEx costs, you spend less money on people, you spend more money on technology, you deflate the cost of operating, and you scale big with tech instead of human capital. You don't love that. It's the quiet part of the cloud. Those are the parts of the market I think that do well.
Good stuff, Dan. Yeah, we need to get you to your corporate meetings. So hopefully you enjoyed the show. I miraculously am staying in Austin for 2 straight weeks here. I know you're traveling to New York to do all of your broadcast interviews. I've got a couple lined up here from home.
Yeah, it's better to do it from home, but I'm hosting, so they don't let me do an hour straight at home.
Are you changing your job, Dan? Are you kind of moving on? Is this kind of like you're becoming a 24/7 markets guy?
I like this stuff, but I mean, look, we've entered the ultimate period of time in history where technology, policy, economics, politics have all come into this massive convergence. And dude, I mean, we don't have all the answers. We're not claiming to be economists or equities analysts, but the technology itself is so important to driving us into the future. And people like us have the insights. We have the access. So I enjoy it. This may not always be a thing, but buddy, this time in history will be written about, I would say, in textbooks, but there won't be textbooks. Our kids will be chat GPTing about this stuff. And their grandkids, because this is one of the most chaotic moments in history. The global trade.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. And chaos loves analysts. And we have analyst companies, we have performance companies, we have media companies, and they all pretty much flourish off of chaos. Good place to be. And anyways, folks, I just want to thank you for tuning in. Hope you like the new format. Give us feedback all the time, good or bad. Keep voting for me that I've won the flip. Again, I'm not as smooth, but I'll never hold your inexperience against you if you don't hold my age against me. Okay?
Later, Gramps.
Take care, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Bye-bye.